Today, we are digging into a really powerful and honestly often unseen force that's been shaping American foreign policy. It's a story that connects an ancient prophecy in Jerusalem to the technological future being built right now in East Asia. And it reveals a deliberate, incredibly high-stakes choice that could very well define the 21st century.
You know, history is just full of these moments, right? A whole civilization gets completely obsessed with one thing, while the real world-changing revolution is quietly happening somewhere else entirely. It's a pattern you see again and again, but what if, this time, it isn't an accident?
I mean, think about it. The Roman elite were debating religious science while a brand new faith was completely remaking their world from the ground up. European courts were fixated on royal bloodlines while the steam engine was busy assembling a whole new kind of power. We see this all the time. The urgent stuff just crowds out what's truly important.
And this is where the source material for this explainer makes a really provocative argument. It says that what's happening today, well, it isn't about distraction or some failure of vision. It's about sophisticated people seeing two very different futures and then consciously choosing to sacrifice one for the other.
Okay, so let's dive into this. We're going to start by exploring the first of these two competing worlds, a world driven by ancient prophecy and this powerful belief that history is barreling towards a final divine conclusion.
So to really understand this worldview, you have to get this one word: eschatology. It's basically the study of the end times. And for millions and millions of people, this is not some abstract, dusty concept. It is a literal roadmap for the future. And right at the heart of this roadmap is a single 37-acre piece of land in Jerusalem, the Temple Mount. For multiple faiths, this isn't just a holy site. It is the geographical stage where the final act of human history is destined to unfold. It's ground zero.
And this right here, this illustrates one of the most powerful and, frankly, unusual political alliances of our time. On one side, you have Israeli religious Zionists who believe rebuilding the temple will usher in their Messiah. On the other, you have American dispensationalist evangelicals who believe that the exact same event is necessary to bring on the Antichrist, the tribulation, and the eventual return of Jesus Christ. Think about that. They expect completely different outcomes, but they share one critical political goal.
And for this massive American voting bloc, the sequence is very, very specific. Rebuilding the temple isn't just some political preference. It's seen as step one in fulfilling a divine prophecy. And this belief, as you can imagine, directly influences their demands on U.S. foreign policy.
So what this creates is this incredibly tense geopolitical standoff. You have these Israeli and American religious movements pushing hard for prophetic fulfillment, and then you have an Iranian theocracy with its own end-times theology that sees the destruction of Israel as a core religious duty. In this story, Iran becomes the primary obstacle in that prophetic timeline.
Okay, so while this ancient drama is unfolding in the Middle East, a very, very different future is being forged about 8,000 miles away. A future that, no ancient prophecy ever described. So now we pivot from that sacred hilltop to a small island that has become the absolute, indispensable center of our modern technological world, Taiwan.
So here is the crucial point, and let this sink in. Taiwan, and really just one company in particular, produces over 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors. These are the tiny silicon brains that power everything. Our phones, our cars, our data centers, our militaries, everything. This dependence on its leading company, TSMC, is so profound that the source material we're looking at calls it, and this is a quote, the single most important manufacturing facility on the planet. I mean, its strategic value is almost impossible to overstate.
And here's why this matters so much. These aren't just components. They are literally the fuel for artificial intelligence. Whoever controls the production of the most advanced chips is going to control the pace of AI development, and with it, they'll control the global balance of power for the next century. It's that simple. And this is where our two stories, the temple and the transistor, violently collide. And it's where the source argues we can see a deliberate, calculated, strategic choice being made, not just some simple mistake. Remember Iran, the main antagonist in that whole eschatological drama? Well, turns out Iran is also a key strategic partner for China. Beijing uses Iran to pin American military assets, diplomatic attention, and political energy to the Middle East, a whole 8,000 miles away from the Taiwan Strait.
Now, the U.S. understood the AI threat from China.
It built this really sophisticated web of sanctions designed for one single purpose: to deny Beijing the advanced chips from places like Taiwan that it needs to win the AI race. It was basically a form of technological siege.
But this entire strategy has one fatal flaw. If China invades and successfully seizes Taiwan, that entire sanctions architecture, it inverts overnight. It stops being a weapon against China and becomes a weapon China can use against the West, cutting off the supply of the very chips our economies and militaries absolutely depend on.
Look, the U.S. has two major strategic priorities, but it only has one set of finite resources. The source argues that policymakers were completely aware of the vulnerability in Taiwan. They knew the risks, and yet intense political pressure directed those finite resources toward the Middle East instead.
So what is the real-world cost of this choice? Well, according to this analysis, it is staggering, and it directly degrades America's ability to act in the Pacific.
This slide just lays out the fundamental mismatch so clearly. American political energy, driven by this eschatology, is intensely focused on a sacred geography that's rooted in the past. But the actual geography of future power, well, that's being built in Taiwan, a place with almost no domestic political constituency to defend it.
And the fallout is direct and it's mechanical. Military resources are diverted. The moral authority you need to build a coalition against China gets spent in a Middle Eastern conflict. That sanctions weapon, it gets turned against us. China, in this scenario, gains a massive strategic victory by simply waiting as its primary rival exhausts itself somewhere else.
And this just brings us right back to the core argument. This wasn't an accident. The analysis was there. The intelligence reports were clear. Sophisticated actors saw both horizons, the sacred and the strategic, and decided that the demands of prophecy outweighed the demands of prudence.
And so, this explainer leaves us with that stark question: a choice between two futures, one driven by an ancient faith and the other by a technological reality. And according to our source material, that choice has already been made, and the consequences are compounding around us every single day.